lucky to have fellow Austinite and artist curator Lucy Gross. Lucy, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Pretty great.
Okay, perfect. Well, I have to believe that that snafu was the Zoom gods telling me to make sure I didn't have lipstick on my teeth. As Ben said, I work with adults with disabilities, and they're a very, very honest group of people. And the other day, I was on Zoom with one of my students, and they really kindly reminded me that I had a giant black bean from my breakfast taco in my teeth. So it's been a nice reminder to myself to act as if you're talking to a bunch of teenagers with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they will be very honest with you. And so double check to make sure you don't have shit in your teeth. So I'm really excited to be here. It is a nice opportunity to kind of step out of the Howard Hughes mode that I think so many of us are in. I even cut my fingernails for the occasion, which feels sort of monumental in a time where, deodorant is optional most days. So I am, I was brought in with what I imagine kind of the idea of talking about spectrum. I work with adults with disabilities, many of whom are on the autism spectrum, but I also sort of immediately started trying to think of how do I tie spectrum into this greater idea, especially for a community that is as creative as Austin's is. So one of the things that I thought of right away was the idea that, so many of us, I think, throughout our lives have heard the adage, everyone is an artist. I am trying to play a slideshow, which I made visually as offensive as possible, but for some reason, I'm not sure that it's working. My husband will probably be pleased because he was, I think, a little worried about it. Marty might step in and try to help out with some of the technical stuff. But I think most of us have probably heard that adage of everyone is an artist. And I just kind of think it's bullshit. I also am really glad that at age 33, I've sort of let go of that. For about 25 years of my life, I think that I was pretty dedicated to figuring out what my artistic medium was, which resulted in a series of embarrassments and badly played instruments. I used to live in Boston, Massachusetts, and decided to pick up an accordion, which is a really hard instrument to play quietly. My neighbors let me know. And so there we go. So I'm so glad that you could see this work of art that I put together. So thanks, Marty. So I spent a long time trying to kind of figure out where my artistic niche was. I tried the accordion. I tried writing really embarrassing poetry. I did a series of really ill-fated embroidery classes. And I think that the idea or the pressure that we're all artists is sort of, I think it discounts the individuality of all of us, which as someone who works with people with disabilities, if I can sort of impart one thing, it's that everyone is an individual. And when we think about people with disabilities, every disability presents differently, and every person with a disability is first and foremost a person. In social work and in the disability community, you might hear the phrase person first language a lot, which means that you refer to the person before the disability. So a person who is blind or a person who uses a wheelchair. And I think that it's really important for the work that I do to remind myself and remind other people that people with disabilities are just like all of us. as Ben was saying, I work for a program called the GO Project, which is a transition program through AISD that teaches 18 to 22-year-olds how to live independently, how to access public transportation. And at least once or twice a year, I'll be on the bus and some really well-intentioned woman will come up and like gently pat me on the shoulder and say like, oh, you know, the work you do is just so important. They're all such angels. And I have to like physically restrain myself from being like, no, some of them are assholes, because people with disabilities are people, and some people are assholes and some people are wonderful. And I think that to me, the most enlightened thing that I can do in my work is to recognize that every person with a disability is just a person, and some of them are going to be people that you want to spend a lot of time with, and some of them are not. But I found social work after sort of going through this Rolodex of creative pursuits, and my sort of initial specialty in working with folks with disabilities was in creating a sex ed curriculum that I could disseminate and teach in schools for adults with disabilities. And that sort of came from this reoccurring theme that I was coming across, which was that, you know, so many people who worked with folks with disabilities and family members of people with disabilities seem to really discount that the spectrum of humanity that includes sexuality. So I wanted to share a couple of actual DVDs that I own. So this is a DVD that is kind of an instruction manual for male masturbation. This is along the same lines, instructions, sort of how-to for female masturbation. I think one thing that we take for granted is how much sort of folks without disabilities, neurotypical people, we learn so much of this from our peers, and that's not the case with folks with disabilities. So a lot of times it takes someone like me with very few inhibitions and I think just a general lack of shame to feel comfortable stepping in and bringing in these kind of ideas. My husband's a really good sport because these do live on our DVD shelf, but I feel like it's all balanced out by the fact that he owns the entire Weird Al box set. And when I was taking a photograph of this for this presentation, he asked me if I wanted him to also pull out the VHS copy. So I just think that that should be noted if you're starting to feel bad for him in any way. So in 2017, my very, very good friend and just kind of constant life mentor, Katie Stahl, and I decided to co-found Sage Studio. Katie and I had met about 5 years prior to that, working at another rehabilitation center that sort of focused on the arts for people with disabilities. And Katie and I immediately bonded over shared aesthetics, and we're really drawn to the same type of work, and we're really excited about the same artists. And one thing that we kind of both would commiserate about was this idea that there was this amazing, body of work that was being created by these artists in Austin, and we would have these exhibitions at Arc of the Arts, and as wonderful as they were, they seemed to sort of be relegated to the disability community. Most of the attendees were either family members or friends that I had coerced into coming, but it wasn't part of this greater conversation in art as the Austin community knows it to be. And I think that one thing that I really hear resonating with all of you is what an amazing community we have here in Austin, what amazing support we have here. And so I think Katie and I both knew that if we could get this work out in front of people, that hopefully they would be as excited about it as we were. So it started in 2017, and again, my husband is very patient and allowed us to just kind of set up camp at my kitchen table. So one of the artists that we had worked with at Arc of the Arts is an artist named Rick Fleming. And the joke is that this whole thing just kind of started as an excuse for us to hang out with Rick. At the time, I was working at Safe Place teaching sex education, and Katie is a practicing artist. And so we would do this on the weekends. We'd get together with Rick, and Rick is one of my favorite human beings and one of the most sarcastic people I've ever met. And we would just kind of have these silly sessions where we would get a bunch of supplies, and Rick is a master of pop culture portraits. And so he would make these amazing portraits at my kitchen table. And while that was amazing and a great excuse for us to get ribbed by Rick and told that our hair looked not as good as it used to look, it was also just one component of this idea that Katie and I had, which was that we really wanted not only for these artists to be producing the work, but to get it out in front of people. And so by happenstance one day, Katie was perusing Craigslist and came across a available rental for a refurbished shipping container in East Austin. I live in East Austin. I love the East Austin community. And so it felt really perfect. And it also felt like this really natural step from a kitchen table to a very, very small shipping container. So we took the plunge and we moved in and started working with more artists. And so today, about 2.5, 3 years later, we have 11 artists that we represent. And 5 of those artists are what we call studio artists, which are artists that actually come into the space and create the work. So Rick is one of our studio artists. We provide the materials. If it weren't pandemic times, this would be the space that Rick would come work in. And Katie and I think of ourselves more like facilitators than teachers. So coming back to the idea of individuality and thinking about people with disabilities as people first, we sort of took that a step further and really wanted to dedicate Sage's mission to thinking about artists with disabilities as artists first. And so, our model is set up a little differently. A lot of people maybe liken it to some sort of art therapy, which I think art can be incredibly therapeutic, but we really look at ourselves as representing professional artists. So we seek out artists whose work we're really drawn to, like Rick, and we exhibit work that we feel like is gallery caliber. So I think that, again, when I come back to that idea of everyone is an artist, I think it really sort of undermines people like Rick and the artists that we show, because I work with people with disabilities all day, and not all of them are artists, just like not all of us in this room are artists. And I think that when I found Sage and when I sort of started to get to do that work, it was the first time that I realized that I could be part of the creative community and I didn't have to be an artist. And I think that for so many of us, it's such a relief to realize that we can participate in this community that we admire and we love as cheerleaders and as facilitators. And so I think that if I can impart something, it's the liberation that comes with putting down the accordion or the embroidery and figuring out, if you don't feel like you have your niche, figuring out how you can support the voices of others. And so Katie and I, since 2017, we've been doing quarterly art shows, which are really amazing. And I feel really proud of the fact that initially, we sought out to create a space that would be inclusive and, would obviously welcome people with disabilities and people from the disability community to come into it. But we also really wanted to create a space that would sort of be appealing to the larger art community in Austin. And one thing that I think is a hallmark of that success is that more and more at our shows and through our orders, we are not just getting orders from our moms anymore, which feels like a great win. We more and more don't recognize people that are at our shows and don't recognize people that are buying the work, which makes me feel really confident that we were right, that the work and the artists that we show mean something to other people as well as to us. And so in addition to the quarterly art shows that, in normal times we would be having at Sage, we've also gotten to participate in pop-ups around town. So we did a holiday pop-up at King Bee. We've tried to think of ways to, again, integrate our artists and our artists' work into the larger community. And Austin loves bars and Austin loves a party. So that was a really successful event where we got to go into this space and have a holiday pop-up, and one of our artists did live portrait drawing, and that was really, I felt like a really successful event. And I hope that when the world returns to some semblance of normalcy, we'll be able to do something like it again. I wanted to show you guys a couple examples of some of the artists that we show. So as I said, we have our studio artists, which are artists that come and work in the studio space. And then we have what's called gallery artists. So those are artists that live somewhere in Texas and either live too far away to come and work in the space, like Charlie French. He's an abstract artist that lives in Dallas, and I think his work is incredible. This is from a series that is all about the boogeyman, which as a October fanatic really speaks to my spooky spirit. And then we also have artists that maybe work in a medium that we can't accommodate in our teeny tiny space. We've showed work by an artist named Laren Harp, who's an amazing blind deaf artist that does ceramics. But as you can see, our space can't quite accommodate a kiln. So Laren would be an example of an artist whose work we would exhibit, but who creates work elsewhere in his own studio. Then we also have a studio artist named Sam Eiler. Sam is an incredible puppet maker. He is 19 years old and creates these Jim Henson reproductions, for lack of a better word, in his room. To go into his bedroom is pretty incredible. He has about 70 puppets that are all made from various things, including like spoons and ping pong balls. And this is a part of a larger puppet that Sam was working on. I was telling Marty before we got started, one of my favorite stories about Sam is Katie and Sam and I had the opportunity to present at South by EDU 2 years ago. And neither Katie or I are coffee drinkers. And but I love free things in general. So this story really resonated with me. We went and we got to go to this green room, and there were, snacks and beverages, and we were offered coffee, and Katie and I both declined, but Sam very naturally said that he would take a coffee with a little cream and sugar. And I didn't really think anything of it. Maybe I should have, but I was probably in my own head like I was this morning and not paying a ton of attention. And we are about to get on stage, and Sam just looks at me and says, "That was my first cup of coffee ever." And I just had this complete oh fuck moment. Like, Sam has just had his first cup of coffee. We're about to go on, and he just bolts for the bathroom. Luckily, Sam is nothing if not a captivating speaker. And so he came back kind of mid-presentation and did a fantastic job. So Sam is another one of our studio artists. Sam comes and works in our space. Anna Burke is another example of a gallery artist. So like Laren, Anna works in a medium that we can't facilitate here in our space. She works on a really large loom and does this intuitive weaving that just produces the most beautiful results. We've been lucky enough to get to exhibit a couple of her fairly large fabric pieces. And so Anna is a gallery artist like Charlie. So while she lives near the Austin area, she creates work out of her own studio, and we exhibit it. And then I saved my very favorite. So Rick Fleming, the artist that kind of started it all. Rick, as I said, is very attached to pop culture. He is a pop culture aficionado. This is part of a series that he was doing where he was actually painting on vinyl. So this is a We Are the World record. And there's something about Tina Turner that really turns my crank on that record. I think it's really wonderful. So Rick actually had the opportunity to go with Katie and I to the Outsider Art Fair in New York on this past January. This was our second time at the Outsider Art Fair, and the first year was amazing, but the experience of getting to take Rick to New York and hanging out with him for 8 hours a day amidst like snobby New York art elite was pretty amazing and perfect. So the Outsider Art Fair is an international art fair that happens every year in New York and in Paris. And Rick got to go with us. He borrowed a suit jacket from his brother, which was pinned at the sleeves. And it was the first time I'd ever not seen him wearing Crocs, which I felt like was really him dressing up. So while Rick was pretty underwhelmed by like David Byrne coming into our booth, I did force his hand and make him take a picture with my personal hero, Mariska Hargitay, pictured here. I mostly put this picture in the slide because I would like it etched on my tombstone. That was sort of, again, if we're going to talk about defining moments in our career, I've been a Law & Order fan for a very, very long time, so that was really special. But I also loved having Rick there because the energy of just, not really caring and being really comfortable in his own skin. I think both Katie and I went in with a lot of nerves and sort of feelings of inadequacy. And so to have Rick there and to have his confidence just meant a lot, and I think really comforted both of us. There were several occasions where he fell asleep in the middle of a very crowded art fair. And so that was sort of its own type of meditation. Another project that we were working on pre-pandemic was a show called Tandem, which was pairing our stage artists with neurotypical professional artists in Austin, kind of based on shared mediums or common themes in their work. So this is a photo of Charlie French, the artist who did the Boogeyman series from Dallas. He actually came down to Austin one day and got to go into Will Bryant's studio. I can look at it from where I'm standing here at Canopy. And it was this really amazing artistic dialogue that happened. Charlie's pretty shy, but they started making this kind of collaborative, almost like tic-tac-toe piece together. And we all just kind of stepped back, and it was so natural. And to watch them sort of converse in this non-language was a really wonderful experience. Another one of our pairs was Emily Dodson and Peyton McGowan. They both just have this really great whimsy in their work and really bright, beautiful colors. And Peyton actually came into our space and brought her work, and she and Emily kind of talked about their process. Like so many of us, Tandem is an example of something that got postponed or got put on hold for a little while. The show was slated for early April. The world fell apart. And so Katie and I sort of immediately tried to figure out how to shift our model. So much of what we did was kind of built on this idea of community. And just like Creative Mornings, we've had to get creative and had to figure out ways to keep our artists engaged, tried to figure out ways to continue to connect with our community and the larger art community. So we moved a lot of our studio operations onto Zoom. This is a picture. Rick has been doing commissioned tote bags. We started it with, we were going to cap it at 10. I think he's close to 30 now. He gets different celebrities that people want him to draw. He just did 2 versions of Keith Richards. And this is an example. He was commissioned to do a Joe Biden tote bag. So here's Rick with his Joe Biden tote. That's been really a nice way for us to continue to get to see our artists. We know that people with disabilities are at a greater risk of social isolation. So I think that it's been really important for us to continue to have contact with those artists. And like so many of us, I think they're feeling lonely and a little restless. And so we sort of went out at the beginning of the pandemic and figured out what they needed to keep making work. And to our surprise, so many of our artists have been even more productive. And I wish that I had their efficiency in this time instead of just watching an entire season of Veronica Mars in a day. Another project that we sort of launched as of the 15th of this month, we did our first virtual exhibition. So normally Sage really focuses on Texas-based artists, but we felt like so much of the world is online right now, and the internet, with all of its downfalls, also allows us to connect with a lot more people than ever before. And there are so many studios like Sage that operate all over the world. They're called sort of progressive studios. And so we've been following a lot of those studios for years and really admiring their work. We had gotten to meet a couple of the artists and a couple of the studio owners in New York. And so we decided to do homemakers and invite some of those artists that we really loved to exhibit work virtually. And so we have an artist from Spain participating. We have artists from New York, California. And so this has been a really fun project. And again, it's sort of the Wild West for us. It's something we had never done before. And while we miss being able to fill this space with Austinites and people, we know that that's not possible right now. And so while Tandem is on hold, we went ahead and launched Homemakers. And at least for my brain right now, the more that I can stay connected to the creative community, the little bit of hope that I have continues to grow. And I think right now it's really easy to read the news and get really bummed out. But things like this and connecting with these artists are really nice reminders that the creative community is still thriving, and finding new pathways for that is really exciting for us. So I really appreciate you guys giving me this platform. I have no idea how long I've been talking. I kind of went into a fugue state, but I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of Katie and myself and Rick. This is from our photo booth at King Bee. And there's our contact info. If you want to learn more or you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and hopefully you can come hang out with us in this little gallery sometime soon.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you so much for not only sharing all of that, but also for working with Marty to share what the studio looks like right now. It's so great to visit with you in your space and to hear you talk from that space. I really appreciated getting the chance to see some of the art, to see the artists as well. I know one question that came up, people were asking where your studio is. Maybe you can just let everyone know that first.
Yeah, absolutely. So as of March, we are now part of the Canopy family, which we're really, really excited about. Canopy has been kind of this hub of creativity and art in Austin. And so to get to be part of this community is huge. We haven't actually really had anyone in our space yet, so it's a nice excuse for me to get to come and hang out here. Prior to that, we were just off of Airport and Bohm. And we moved basically from one small shipping container to another. So this tiny space suits us really well.
Awesome. And the current show that you were talking about, is that something people can see now?
Yeah, so Homemakers is live, and it is available to view through our website, sagestudioatx.com. And we're really pleased. A lot of the work has sold, but there are still pieces available, and you can still see the entire show. It'll be up through October.
And Maria's asking if you're open to the public by appointment?
We haven't done any appointments yet. I think we're sort of starting to dip our toe. We had our first in-person session with Rick about a week ago. I was really proud of him for wearing a mask the entire time. It's a new experience for all of us. So definitely reach out, and maybe we can work something out. Again, up until about a week ago, we had no art on the walls, so there wouldn't have been very much to see. But we have tried to really build out our online store to give folks a really good idea of, the breadth of the artists and all the cool stuff they're doing. And Rick is still taking tote bag commissions if anyone has a brilliant portrait idea.
I know Rebecca was wanting that Biden tote. Are those truly one-offs, or are they being produced on a different level?
We have a little project that we're not quite ready to talk about, but that might be coming soon.
Taylor is ready to commission an RGB.
Oh yeah, we were talking. RGB would be a great tote.
Besides the Biden one, though, are there ways that people can buy totes from that series?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can, all we ask for is a reference image. I had one made for my dad. And so Rick did a somewhat flattering illustration of my dad and I. But if you send us the picture, Rick does an amazing job with his interpretation. He just finished Kyle MacLachlan Twin Peaks tote that really, really spoke to my heart.
Awesome. Joanna has a great question. I think she's off mute. You can ask it yourself.
Hi, good morning. Hi, Lucy. My question is, how many artists do you currently work with, and how do the artists find you, or how do you find them?
Yeah, so we currently sort of represent 11 artists, and 5 of those artists come and work in the space. And we have had sort of folks come to us from all different places. Again, I've worked in the disability community for about 10 years. So sometimes it's, I have a student in my class, or I have a coworker who has a really talented student or someone they work with. Some of it is word of mouth. We have an application form on our website, so artists can submit their work on there for consideration. But the internet and Instagram is a really amazing place. And I think that, again, for all of the evils of social media, I've been really excited to see artists with disabilities have their own Instagram accounts and a really visual medium for them to communicate and connect with other people. So some of our artists, we just found through combing Instagram.
I know Instagram's fantastic for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucy.
You mentioned that you don't necessarily have the space for a kiln or some of the larger equipment. There was a question, someone was asking or wondering whether you could do something with the weather becoming nicer, if you've considered any outdoor events or outdoor moments for studio artists.
Yeah, so we actually, the folks at the Carpenter reached out to us, and I think we're going to be doing a little outdoor pop-up there, maybe with a preview of some of the work that was going to be exhibited at Tandem. And so that's an opportunity. Again, I think all of us are kind of trying to get creative of how do we take what we're doing in a very small enclosed space and make it work in these strange new times. So I think we're looking into some sort of outdoor pop-up, especially now that it's not 100 degrees at 7 a.m.
Loving that for my walks, I have to say. Used to be actually 7 a.m. was the only time you could walk.
Yeah.
Now you can get away with it at 7 p.m. sometimes too. Okay, I think that those are all the questions, and I'm getting to the point in my day where my family is starting to take over. You can see Katie has found all the filters. Hopefully you get to have some fun with filters in your life too. But I just want to say thank you again, Lucy. It was a pleasure.
Good job, Katie.
It was a pleasure to hear everything that you have experienced so far with Sage Studio. I'm really looking forward to how you and Katie continue to make this project amazing for Austin artists and global artists. And we can't wait to be there in person one day. So we don't have to wear virtual goggles. We can wear the real ones, right? Okay. Thank you again, Lucy.
Have a creative morning.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. We love y'all. Have a great morning.